Chapter 70, Wild Wolf Valley. Wake up, Big Head. We're setting off. Due to his poor qi and blood, Zhang Tai's biological clock had been delayed for the past couple of days. The next morning, Fatty Barley woke up Zhang Tai by shaking him. Opening his eyes, Zhang Tai realized it was almost dawn, as the last star was still hanging in the eastern parts of the sky. After spending an entire night sleeping on a sturdy stone, Zhang Tai felt a tinge of pain on the back of his head. Seeing that both Fatty Barley and Doug had already awoken, Zhang Tai also hurriedly climbed out of his sleeping bag and started to pack his luggage. The day had not broken yet, however. The horny students in the square had already woken up one by one and were preparing for the upcoming survival training. I've noticed that more than 10 groups have already left. It's our turn now, Fatty Barley said as he arranged his luggage. Did you wake up early? Rolling up his sleeping bag, Zhang Tai asked Barley. Of course, I woke up early. Afterwards, I began to count the number of groups that had left. Those guys will find a path for us, and we will follow them. It won't be good if we're too early or too late. This fatty is truly cunning. Zhang Tai admired inwardly. But it's really reassuring to have him as a brother. Picking himself up from the ground, Zhang Tai glanced at where Glaze's group had stayed last night. As he predicted, the 4 people had already disappeared. It seemed that they had already climbed down the mountain a long time ago. As this survival training was the final chance for Glaze, he might be more anxious than anyone else to perform well. The 7 members of the Hit Plane Brother arranged their luggage quickly and then followed the over 10 groups that had departed earlier from the square outside Wild Wolf Castle. Leading to the valley below was a 200 long path paved with broken stones from the square. Walking along the path that twisted around the mountain, they entered the valley. 2 other groups walked alongside the members of the Hit Plane Brotherhood before splitting up with them at the bottom of the mountain. From this point on, they had become opponents to the other groups, as there were limited inhabitable places and resources in the valley that could only be gained through luck and fighting. On the first day of the survival training, everyone's first test was to search for a suitable place to stay. In the wild, a proper place to stay had to meet the following 3 conditions. First, it had to be close to a clean water source. Second, it had to be sufficiently safe. Third, it had to be in a place that was convenient for them to gather enough food in the future. Although they could feel safe and would be close to a clean water source if they stayed near the castle, it would be difficult to gather enough food. Based on the experiences of those from the previous years, most people chose to stay about 1 to 7 kilometers away from the castle, though some arrogant people or groups with many members would choose a place a bit farther to stay. With an axe in hand, Baghdad cleared the path before them as Doug, Barley, and Zhang Tai followed. Hista and Sharwin followed behind Zhang Tai, and Leet stayed at the end of the line. Everybody held their weapons and entered the valley cautiously. They couldn't be careless here because just as they walked down the path, Doug had stepped into a pile of feces from some unknown beast, who seemed to have left it here last night. When Doug cursed loudly, they all felt a chill in their hearts. They once again reminded themselves that this was Wild Wolf Valley and not Black Hot City. After walking for 200 m in the valley, Sharwin found a waterleaf willow. He then picked up several willow twigs and distributed them to the other members of the Hit Plane Brotherhood. They then chewed the willow twigs for the water inside the twigs, using it to wash their mouths. In the wild, they had to be frugal. As it was early in the morning, the temperature in the valley was still a bit low. The valley was still covered with a thin layer of fog, and dew was still on the leaves of the trees and in the grass. After walking for a while, a small portion of their clothes had gotten wet. The gugugu sound from some unknown birds on the trees reverberated from far away. The valley then gradually became quiet. After traveling less than 500 m since they entered the valley, they encountered their first wolf. When Baghdad was waving the huge axe to clear the path, a wolf that had been resting in the grass 20 m away suddenly stood up. After staring at them, it immediately turned back and disappeared into the woods before they could respond. The sight of the wolf naturally made everybody tightly grip their weapons. After walking another 1 kilometer, they found a crystal stream with a width of more than 5 meters. The river was so translucent that they could even clearly see the cobblestones and the water weeds at the bottom, as well as a shoal of small fish that was swimming happily among the water weeds. I suggest we go deep into the valley along the river. It would be great if we could find an inhabitable place along the river, Baghdad uttered. Fine. Everybody agreed. Thus, they descended into the valley along the river. After another 1 kilometer, they passed by an abandoned mine. Surrounding that mine were several caves in the mountains nearby. The two groups that had arrived earlier had already occupied two of those caves. Seeing the huge and perfectly round caves in the precipices and the ridges, Doug asked curiously, how could there be so many strange caves in the precipices? I heard that there used to be gold-eating boas who would twist over there in the past and would bore holes for themselves, but later on, they were exterminated by humans. As a result, those holes were left, Sharwin said. Caves of gold-eating boas? Doug asked surprisingly. Seeing those round caves in the precipices and the ridges whose diameters varied from 1 m to 3 m, Zhang Tai forcefully swallowed his saliva. He tried to imagine how large those gold-eating boas would be if those caves were the size of the gold-eating boas. At this thought, Zhang Tai's legs felt weak, and he felt despair when he looked at those pitch-black holes. Of course, you didn't know that? Sharwin asked curiously. How did you know? Turning pale, Leet asked Sharwin. I read about it from the local chronicles of Black Hot City, Sharwin said without any hesitation. I remember that these gold-eating boas from the Wild Wolf Valley were recorded in the local chronicles of Black Hot City more than 30 years ago. It was said that these gold-eating boas were as old as 1,000 years. At that time, in order to eliminate them, the whole Blackson human clan corridor had to take action and numerous high-level fighters arrived from all directions. With the cooperation between the armies and the numerous high-level fighters, they were finally able to kill them all. After that, Black Hot City found an iron mine and a high-quality crystal mine. Tens of years later, nowadays, the crystal mine has almost been completely depleted and became useless. In contrast, the iron mine was completely deserted when the Glang iron mine was discovered. They had transferred the personnel over to the Glang iron mine due to this mine being more costly and producing lower-quality iron ores, thus this iron mine was gradually abandoned. After the gold-eating boas were killed, the population of the wild wolves sharply increased. Seeing so many wild wolves here, they named this place as the Wild Wolf Valley. Naturally, nobody in the Hit Plain Brotherhood, with the exception of Sharwin, would be bored enough to read the local chronicles of Black Hot City. Although this event had happened more than 30 years ago, it was still terrifying to them even now. What if they didn't kill them all and had left a small one, Doug muttered. With the sound of Gulu, everybody forcefully swallowed their saliva. Looking at those mountain caves once again, they dared not to live inside them anymore. I think we're better off not going too deep into the valley. If we can't find a suitable place to stay after another 2 kilometers, we should turn back, Fatty Barley immediately suggested with a solemn look. Everybody hurriedly nodded, and even Baghdad didn't object. Thinking of how this place used to be teeming with huge snakes and monsters that were as long as 100 m and could even eat the stones before them, everyone had an inexplicable feeling about Wild Wolf Valley. After searching for about 4 hours, the 7 members of the Hit Plain Brotherhood finally found a place that was about 5 kilometers away from Wild Wolf Castle. There was a dragon claw tree with a diameter of more than 10 m near the small woods. Unknown whether or not this was a mutated species, this dragon claw tree that was covered in lumps was the largest one they had ever seen. Its height was greater than 50 m, and at the top of the tree was a cloud-like crown, which covered several mu of land. Previously, seeing the tree, they had wanted to take a rest over there, but they ended up finding a hollow cave on the tree that was 4 m away from the ground. Climbing onto the tree, Baghdad took a peep inside and surprisingly found that the inside of the hollow cave was very spacious and could easily hold 3 people. What was more marvelous was that someone had once lived inside. This should have been the living place of someone who had previously attended the survival training. Everybody then became excited. Each of them climbed onto the tree to peep inside. Fortunately, they found another natural hollow cave, which was much smaller than the first one and could only hold 1 person, 7 m above the ground on the same tree. Even with the 2 hollow caves, the dragon claw tree still looked very green. However, the wood inside the tree had already become completely rotten. It seemed as if it had been struck by lightning, as one could easily grab some wood scraps from the inside of the hollow cave. Why not renovate it into a place that could hold the 7 of us? Leet's words made everybody spirited. It could already hold 4 people and it did not seem difficult to further renovate it, thus everyone immediately started to work. The renovation was composed of 2 steps. The first step was to expand the space of the 2 hollow caves as much as possible. The lower cave should be able to hold 4 people, their equipment, and food, while the upper cave should be expanded as much as possible. If it was expanded to be as large as the lower cave, then it would be able to hold another 3 people and they would all be able to live inside. After expanding the inner space of the 2 tree caves, they would arrive at the second step of renovation, breaking through the two hollow caves by leaving an N-shaped path between them. At least 2 or 3 people could sleep in the N-shaped space, so they would not feel cramped inside the caves. As they had learned some preliminary carpenter's skills at school and didn't need to make it nice-looking and delicate, they could easily do this kind of work. Baghdad waved his axe together while Zhang Tai and Leet used their multi-purpose military shovels. With wood scraps flying everywhere, it only took them over 2 hours to finish the work on the lower hollow cave. Seeing those wood scraps inside the hollow caves, Barley shouted, "Ah, don't throw them away. These dried wood scraps can be used as firewood. We will not have to worry about lacking firewood for the next couple of weeks." Everybody burst out into laughter. Chapter 71, Base and Dreams. Using his multipurpose military shovel, Zhang Tai dug in the upper hole in the tree. The military shovel could become a miniature hoe by folding the foldable shovel head vertically into each other. One edge of the head of the hoe was very sharp and could be used as a miniature axe, while the other edge was full of jagged teeth and could be used as a saw. While humming a tune, Zhang Tai flicked the shovel to clean off the rotten woods in the cave. As everyone found it refreshing and interesting to live in tree hollows, they worked really hard. Barley and Sharwin were responsible for making a fire to cook supper that would be cooked in the huge black pot on the stone hearth, and Doug and Hista were responsible for sending out warnings for any danger within 50 m, while Zhang Tai, Baghdad, and Leet were responsible for the renovation of the holes in the trees. After renovating the lower hole, the 3 of them placed all their attention onto the upper hole. Compared to the lower hole, the upper hole required more work. As the upper hole had a limited amount of space and only had enough space to allow one person to enter for the first time, only when the first person had expanded the size inside could a second person enter. Thus, it was slower to renovate the upper hole. Zhang Tai was the first one to enter the upper hole. 1 hour later, Zhang Tai exited the hole and replacing him was Leet. After another hour, Leet exited and Baghdad entered. After 2 more hours, the space inside could already barely hold 2 people, thus as Baghdad left, Zhang Tai and Leet entered again. After another hour of work, Baghdad could push himself in as well. From then on, the renovation work for the upper hole started to accelerate. At noon, several groups of students from the 2nd National Male Middle School and the 7th National Male Middle School also noticed the renovated tree hollows. 2 groups of guys from the 2nd National Male Middle School had even intended to chase away the Hitplane Brotherhood by relying on their superior numbers, but when Doug held the Iron Gate T-21 and aimed it at those malicious fellows, they could only reluctantly leave as the corners of their eyes twitched. They would never have imagined that the Hitplane Brotherhood would be so crazy to even bring along the Iron Gate T-21. The Iron Gate T-21 was a machine-driven crossbow with 2 strings, and the 2 strings could be pulled simultaneously, allowing one to shoot 2 arrows at the same time. The arrows shot from the Iron Gate T-21 could pierce through an armored human body as long as it was within a distance of 50 m. Anyone who wanted the tree hollows would suffer a miserable loss once Doug pulled the trigger of the bow twice. Naturally, nobody dared to trespass in their territory. As it was merely a place to stay, casualties were not worth it. Working through the entire afternoon, they finally finished renovating the upper hole just as dusk was about to fall. At the time of completion, the upper hole could barely allow 2 people to lay inside. However, having 2 people lay inside and having 3 people stand inside were completely different matters, as the 3 people standing would all feel a bit exhausted. Finally, Leet couldn't stand anymore and was replaced by Hista. Baghdad and the other members of the Hitplane Brother were really amazed that Zhang Tai could stand as long as Baghdad. They were even in awe at Zhang Tai, who looked as normal as before. For Zhang Tai, he had indirectly showed his strength as a LV-1 fighter and could even surpass Baghdad by a bit at that moment. After igniting his shrine burning point, Zhang Tai's physique had already improved greatly, quickly narrowing the gap between the physique of a Chinese and that of another human race. Certainly, if Baghdad had also ignited his shrine burning point and had gained the same benefits as him, then Zhang Tai knew that he would not be his match. But, how could Baghdad ignite his shrine burning point as fast as him? After thinking through this point, Zhang Tai became more confident of being able to successfully complete the survival training. In the evening, the aroma drifting from the hot pot of soup made everyone feel hungry. Naturally, when Barley called them, everybody took their own food container and moved around that pot of hot soup. Compressed dry food plus a bowl of hot meat soup, it was simply perfect. Inside the soup were the dried beef brought by Barley and the wild fiddlehead foraged by Sharwin. After boiling them in lightly salted water, they ended up with the delicious soup. Everybody was satisfied with this supper. After supper, they cleaned their dinnerware in the small stream a few dozen meters away. When they all returned, they all sat by the bonfire under the tree as they discussed their next course of action. I think it will take us another day to finish the second stage of the renovation, after which we would be able to completely put the 2 holes to use. The food that we had brought with us will only last 1 week. For the remaining 2 months, we will have to gather food by ourselves. Considering how we all eat from the same big pot, in theory, we should all submit about 1 kilogram of food each day, Barley said solemnly as he glanced over every member of the Brotherhood. Since this survival training is dangerous, we might lose our lives when searching for food. We have to take this seriously. As we are brothers and will eat together, we have to consider our collective interests as well as our individual interests when it comes to obtaining food and its distribution. We will not force any member of the Brotherhood to do something that is inconsistent with the principles of our Brotherhood. I've already thought up a plan for food allocation. Let's discuss about that. Barley then poured out the details of his distribution plan. The food collected through a group effort will be evenly distributed and consumed by all the members of the Hitplane Brotherhood. If an individual acquires food by themselves, then it will be dealt according to its weight. For amounts less than 1 kilogram, since they all ate from the same big pot, it should be used to replenish the group's food supply, so that will belong to the group. For amounts that weighed between 1 kilogram and 3 kilograms, it will belong to the individual's emergency food supply, which should be safely stored somewhere and would only be used in times of emergency. As everyone has to eat, if someone in the group has an insufficient amount, someone else would have to bail you out. For amounts greater than 3 kilograms, it will depend on the individual who found it. They could send it to others, use it to seduce girls, or exchange it for other things at Wild Wolf Castle. That person could also contribute the food to the Hitplane Brotherhood in exchange for credits worth the same in the market of Black Hot City. The credits could then be exchanged for a ticket when it accumulated to a certain degree. Using Barley as an example, that fatty had 2 vote tickets because of his contributions to the Hitplane Brotherhood. After Barley declared his plan, everybody agreed after a short discussion. It truly considered both their individual interests as well as the collective interests of the group. If I submit more than 1 kilogram of food every day, can I freely do my own thing for the rest of the time? Zhang Tai asked Barley. You can be free to do your own thing. However, at our tree base, from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day, we must have at least 1 person on duty that will cook. In addition, we will take turns being on duty. One will stay on duty from 6 p.m. to midnight, and someone else will replace him from midnight to 8 a.m. As long as you submit enough food and will not disturb the other members, you are free to do whatever you want during the rest of the time. After explaining, Barley curiously looked at Zhang Tai and gave him a suggestion. Big Head, it's dangerous to act alone. As we are brothers, we should work together for the sake of our safety. The thing I want to do is probably something you guys don't want to do. Zhang Tai smiled. Baghdad raised his chest and replied, there's nothing to fear. If you want to fight Glaze's group, we brothers will support you. That's right, the rest of the people said in unison. I want to dig in the mines. Do you still want to go with me? Zhang Tai said as he stared at those guys. Hearing his words, everyone's eyes opened widely. Dig in the mines? You want to dig in the mines? With his mouth gaping, Barley asked. I know how you guys see those who aren't able to find food and have to suffer bitter feelings because they couldn't find enough food to complete the survival training. But, I really do find mining to be fun. Zhang Tai blinked as he naively looked at them. I have always felt since I was young that mining was interesting. Since I have the opportunity, I must seize this chance. Brother, you will regret it. Hista sincerely suggested. This survival training is our test and is also an opportunity arranged by Black Hot City for us to get acquainted with and perhaps even marry those girls. No girl would like a man who isn't even able to gather sufficient amounts of food through hunting and would rather just make himself dirty in the caves. The people who had dug in the mines there in the past years were just guys with bad luck. Most of them were even single. Since this has been one of my dreams since I was a kid, I would still like to give it a try. If it's not interesting, then I'll just come back. Hearing Zhang Tai's words, the corner of everybody's mouths began to twitch. They became speechless. Even Barley couldn't think it through. Since Zhang Tai was such a smart kid, why did he want to be a miner when he was a kid? Though, he wasn't one to speak since he had dreamed to become a prestigious concierge when he was a child. Seeing the looks of amazement on their faces, Zhang Tai apologized inwardly, sorry, brothers. This survival training means different things for you and I. For you, you are here to gather sufficient food and perhaps even earn the favor of those girls, but I am here to gather enough energy for my castle of black iron. I don't know where else I could replenish my castle of black iron's basic energy storage. It would be difficult for me to find an opportunity in a short period of time once we return back to Black Hot City or some other destination. Before the survival training had begun, Zhang Tai had already decided that his goal for the survival training was to make the castle of black iron grow stronger. After learning of the effects of the first leafless fruit and surviving his first life and death encounter, Zhang Tai obtained a deep understanding of the changes and hopes that the castle of black iron had brought. The castle of black iron and that small tree were his two top-guarded secrets, ones which were closely related to his fate. Because of the castle of black iron and that marvelous tree, Zhang Tai had already stepped onto a road that was completely different from the others. When compared to the castle of black iron and the marvelous tree, a little bit of food, the looks of ridicules, and the mocking from others became nothing significant. As Zhang Tai and the others were idly chatting under the tree, Doug, who had run towards the grass to relieve his bowels, suddenly shrieked, causing all the members of the Hitplane Brotherhood to grab their weapons and rush towards him. Baghdad and Zhang Tai rushed forward shoulder in shoulder, causing Baghdad to cast a look of amazement at Zhang Tai. When they drew close to Doug, everybody gaped. With his trousers off, Doug was crying as he jumped around in the grass while covering his bottom. "Ah, my ass. These bastards. Can't they even let me take a sh*t?" Seeing the members of the Brotherhood running towards him, with dripping tears, Doug ran towards them with his bottom exposed as if he had just seen his saviors. "Help! Quick! Help me take a look. My ass was just bitten by something. I think it might be poisonous. I'm going to die. Help!" Without even having pulled up his trousers, Doug ran towards the group, inevitably tripping on his trousers and falling onto the ground. When Doug fell, Zhang Tai clearly saw a bloody mark on his swollen left butt cheek. Baghdad hurriedly helped Doug up as Zhang Tai rushed towards where Doug had just been. That guy had just left a landmine. There was a pile of sh*t over there. The moment Zhang Tai arrived there, the odor almost made him vomit. However, compared to the life of his brother, the smell was nothing serious. Zhang Tai wanted to figure out what had bitten Doug, so he could quickly cure him with the right medicine. As he ran over there, Zhang Tai casually broke a twig. When he arrived, Zhang Tai held his breath and started to search for the thing that had bitten Doug at the place where he had squatted. Luckily, he soon found a blue-gray scorpion which had its tail raised in the patch of grass beside the landmine. It was currently preparing to attack Zhang Tai. The instant Zhang Tai saw it, he became relaxed. However, the smelly odor almost made Zhang Tai roll backwards. He broke the twig into two halves and nipped the scorpion as if he was nipping vegetables with a pair of chopsticks. "Ah! It's so painful. I'm going to die. Hurry, brothers. Someone help me suck out the poison. If not, I really will die soon. I already feel numb in half my body. Ah! I feel cold. Hurry up." "Ah!" Doug cried miserably over there as he glanced at the other members of Hitplane Brotherhood, who showed weird expressions. Before Zhang Tai returned, every member of the Hitplane Brotherhood looked pale and had a solemn look on their faces. They looked as if they were making a choice of life or death as they stared at the swollen spot on Doug's butt. The atmosphere was very weird. They looked at each other and became speechless. Sucking out the poison wasn't a problem, but someone would have to put their mouth on Doug's butt. That. As they were drawing lots, at the sight of Zhang Tai, who was walking towards them with the scorpion, everyone hurriedly rushed forward as if they had seen their savior. "Don't worry, it's nothing serious. It's just an ordinary blue-gray scorpion, which isn't very poisonous. Those who had been bitten will recover after a day of rest." As he said that, Zhang Tai showed the scorpion to the others. Whoop! Everybody became relaxed. At the same time, Doug, who was crying about how that poisonous fluid had flowed into his heart and how half his body had already felt numb, shut his mouth. It was just an ordinary blue-gray scorpion which had a little toxicity. Those who were bitten would only feel a little bit of pain, and at most, it would slightly affect their actions temporarily. It was nothing serious. After becoming relaxed, they realized something and then shot Doug, who was still lying on his stomach, a furious glare. What a bastard! Thinking of how Doug said that half his body already felt numb and the poisonous fluid had flowed into his heart, they realized they were almost cheated by him. At this realization, when they had come to terms with what the consequences of being cheated by Doug would have been, everybody became furious inside. Moving forward with an obscene smile, Barley said, "You said that you felt half your body being numb?" Kaka. With a pinch of his fingers, Baghdad also gloomily walked over. "You also said you had started to feel cold. Poisonous fluid had already arrived at your heart?" Lead asked solemnly with arms crossed. "Were you planning to let us suck out the poison from your butt?" Hista smiled obscenely. "You are a liar." Sharwin pouted. Feeling as if something was not right, Doug immediately pulled up his trousers and stood up. Seeing his movement, even Zhang Tai frowned and became speechless. "He seems to have not even cleaned his butt. He's really great. Just now, was too nervous." "Right, I was too nervous, so my body had the wrong feelings." Doug stammered. "Felt the wrong feelings? We'll help you correct it. I remember a method. We don't need to suck out the poisonous fluid for you. There's a mystical oriental treatment where we just beat your wounds to help the poisonous fluid flow out." Saying that, Baghdad kicked Doug's wound, causing him to cry out miserably. The instant Doug intended to escape, he was caught by Baghdad. Afterwards, with the exception of Zhang Tai, everybody charged at him. In the next 3 minutes, Doug, who had just been stung by a scorpion, got to experience the beating treatment and its effects. Chapter 73, Becoming a Miner. The castle square was even more boisterous than the municipal square in Black Hot City. With just a slight glance, Zhang Tai knew that there were at least 800 to 900 people there. The male students were trading goods, mostly food, with the female students. Some of the male students exchanged the prey they had caught with the female students for various wild vegetables, while the other male students formed small groups with the female students in an attempt to get acquainted with each other. With a simple sweep of his glance, Zhang Tai was able to see dozens of horny male students proudly displaying their strong arms and patting their chests in front of the girls. In order to make their weak bicep muscles stand out, some of the seemingly weak guys had even turned red all over, causing the girls to giggle. This was also the most attractive factor in the survival training. Once both parties agree, the male students and the female students could form a group to complete the survival training together. As long as the female students returned to the castle before 8 p.m., nobody would interfere with their movements. After several years of compulsory education, which separated the male students from the female students, the sheer terror of talking to the opposite sex was finally conquered. Unless the female students were forced to do something against their will, they could do whatever they wanted. In the end, love was both a trivial matter and an important matter. It was trivial when it was private, but at the same time, it was also important because it is the foundation of the existence of the human race and was something which could not be easily controlled. At the beginning, as female students had the initiative, the horny male students could only try their best to attract girls. For the shy guys, they would get familiar with the girls through exchanging goods and food. For the shameless guys, they would rush towards girls and ask, "Beauties, how about joining us? We're powerful. If you join us, we promise you will have meat to eat every day." Most of the guys from this group would then suffer from glares filled with contempt. In contrast, the lucky and power guys who were more experienced with women would directly bring their hunted prey to the square and would loudly shout, inviting girls to eat supper with them. These guys would always easily succeed. A few moments after Zhang Tai arrived at the square, Zhang Tai saw a group of horny students from the Second National Male Middle School carrying a dead boar. Soon after they shouted to invite girls to eat roasted boar in the valley tonight. 2 groups of girls joined. Feeling spirited, those horny students left together with the 2 groups of girls. Only at the sight of this scene did Zhang Tai understand why Barley had brought such a huge black pot. Needless to say, he was preparing to attract girls with it, as there was a clear difference between cooking food with a pot and without. Since they had to stay here for 2 months, no matter how powerful one was, even though one could capture prey every day, one would not be able to find a girl who liked to continuously eat roasted meat for 2 months. Zhang Tai seemed to see the cunning smile on Fatty's face. Besides mutual recognition, they could also show off their strength and special abilities in the square. Seeing some of the goods traded by the students, Zhang Tai was amazed. It was only the 3rd day of the survival training, yet someone had already made some practical goods, like bamboo-woven mattresses, medicinal herb cages, pillows, wooden stools, bowls, basins, and barrels. Practical application was truly the best way to test one's talents. Those handmade goods reminded Zhang Tai of the pride of 7th National Male Middle School, Li Shizhen, the talented Chinese student who was always average school but showed off his exceptionally high talents in medicine by continuously making several types of potent medicine in order to sell it. Immediately following the survival training, he became well known and obtained an opportunity to be recommended by the school. Thus, at this moment, for the students, this survival training was the most important opportunity for them to win a school recommendation. If one had already advanced to become a power fighter, then they would use their strength to kill wild beasts and bring them back. If one had the talent to become a medicinal master, they would create miraculous medicinal pills and medication. If one had a pair of delicate hands and special techniques, they would create something special and show them off. Of course, if one was a good-for-nothing and didn't even have the confidence to gather food in the wild, then they could only dig in the mines and do laborious work. If one suffered from labor work, then they wouldn't have to starve to death during the survival training. People who were able to withstand the suffering and do labor work were always needed in human society, as not everyone could be surrounded by glory and fresh flowers. Standing before the outer castle, a few guys were reading the notice on the door. Seeing the missions on the notice, some shook their heads and left, while others looked happy and intended to give it a try. Zhang Tai easily pushed his way through the crowd. Raising his head, he looked at the notice that had just been released. The first mission, Wild Wolf Castle, was preparing to create coal, which burns through a large amount of wood in a short period of time. The people with strength but have yet to acquire prey can go get an axe and chop some wood. In exchange for the firewood, one can acquire food. For those who have confidence in their ability to make charcoal, they are free to apply to join this team. Since making charcoal was something that had been taught at school, many students would be able to survive in this manner. However, neither of the two jobs were something to be proud of. Those two jobs would only allow them to survive, temporarily avoiding death by starvation. The second mission, charcoal, was naturally used to smelt iron, and an iron smelting workshop was opened together with the charcoal kiln in Wild Wolf Castle. Besides needing charcoal, they also needed iron ores and people who were confident in their abilities of smelting iron and striking iron. Although they were also skills, iron smelting and iron striking were much more advanced than making charcoal and digging in the mines. Anyone who was able to smelt and strike iron could directly show off without restraint. The third mission, a lot of people are needed to create lime in the lime kiln. As lime was needed to taw numerous hides later, it was a necessity. As for the remaining missions, Zhang Tai didn't feel like reading them anymore. After scanning the notice, Zhang Tai directly entered Wild Wolf Castle. Entering the gate of the castle, he took a right and walked for more than 30 m. There, he saw a small room in the small square in between the inner castle and the outer castle. It was labeled as Comprehensive Logistics Management. In front of the door was a desk which was occupied by two girls, who were chatting like a pair of birds, sitting behind it. It was only when Zhang Tai had moved closer to them that they raised their head and glanced over Zhang Tai. At the age of 15, Zhang Tai looked average and was neither tall nor short. His appearance was not particularly pleasing to the eye, but at the very least, he wasn't irritating to look at. After glancing over Zhang Tai, the girls were not interested. With an official-sounding tone, one of the two asked Zhang Tai, "Can I help you?" "I'm here to get a shovel and a basket," Zhang Tai calmly answered. "You want to dig in the mines?" Hearing Zhang Tai's words, the two girls were startled. They once again glanced over Zhang Tai. The strange look in their eyes had hinted to Zhang Tai that there was some sort of problem. "Yes. Although I have not done it before, I find it to be quite interesting, so I want to take this opportunity to experience it," Zhang Tai replied with a smile without feeling the least bit of embarrassment. Seeing Zhang Tai's smile, the strange look in the eyes of the two girls lessened as they looked at each other with a look that seemed to say that male students really do like to do strange things. "Fine. Fellow classmate, please show me your student number plate, so I can help you register." After undoing the metal student number plate hanging from his neck, Zhang Tai handed it to her. Each student was given a student number plate when they entered school. It was akin to the identification card used by the students in Black Hot City, but these would not be used during normal times. It was only during the survival training that the schools required the students to bring with them their student number plates. There was a saying among those horny students: the student number plate was used to identify the corpse of any student that had died so miserably that they couldn't even identify the face. After registering the number from his student number plate, that girl gave it back to Zhang Tai. "I need to warn you that you should not damage the shovel or the basket. If you damage them, you will be asked to pay for them at their original prices. From now on, you are expected to hand in at least 100 kilograms of iron ores a day. You can exchange them for food. The more ores you hand in, the more food you will get. If you are not able to hand in the minimum amount of ores for 3 consecutive days, then you will lose your qualification to be a miner. At that point, you will be asked to hand back the shovel and the basket. Fine. Is there anything else I need to remember? Do you know where the abandoned mines are in Wild Wolf Valley? Yes, I know. The closest one is less than 200 m below the castle. That's fine. If you don't know how to identify iron ore, you can go to the iron smelting workshop to learn about it. They have many samples over there. As she said this, the girl pointed at a direction in the small square of the outer castle. Fine. Submitting 100 kilograms of iron ore each day was a pretty low requirement. This made Zhang Tai feel reassured that he would have enough time to do what he wanted. It seemed that only a few people wanted to take this job since it was too easy. Most people felt that it was too shameful to do this job since it was prepared for those who were on the brink of starving to death. After telling him about these matters, the girl turned around and entered the warehouse beside her. Less than half a minute later, she returned and brought out a steel shovel as well as a basket. It seemed as if someone had cleaned the two items in the past couple of days. Despite not having been used for the past year, it was not dirty at all. Throwing the shovel into the basket, Zhang Tai carried the basket that was higher than a child. Waving his hand to the two girls as he bade them farewell, Zhang Tai awkwardly walked out of Wild Wolf Castle with his spear in hand. As expected, his equipment caused everyone on the road to glare at him. The moment he moved past the gates of the castle, Zhang Tai heard a weird voice full of cynicism. Wow, who's that fish? Isn't that the brave guy from our school? Turning his head, Zhang Tai saw Glaze's group casting a glare full of contempt at him. As the old saying goes, one cannot avoid one's enemy. Chapter 74, I Like Women. Although Zhang Tai was pretty eye-catching, Glaze's group of 4 was also pretty eye-catching. However, they attracted attention for different reasons. One party was a new, miserable miner, while the other party were warriors who had returned with many felled preys. Sharon carried 3 wolf hides, Garner and Zuhair carried a sheep that weighed more than 40 kilograms, and Glaze simply crossed his arms, giving off an arrogant feeling. How could you be so miserable? You already want to be a miner on the 3rd day? Do you want me to share some meat with you? No matter what, we are still schoolmates. We have thrown so many away. If we had known that you were so miserable, we would have left the wolf meat for you, Sharon said as he lifted the wolf hides. Oh, I almost forgot. We will be eating sheep meat tonight. If you kneel down in front of Boss Glaze, we might give you some of the soup, Zuhair sneered by the side. Seeing this group of idiots, Zhang Tai became speechless. Were their brains stuck in sh*t? They only had a LV-2 fighter and 3 followers, yet they still dared to be arrogant in front of me? Ever since he had killed Snade and Huck, unbeknownst to himself, Zhang Tai had become entirely different than before. He was becoming more and more powerful, both mentally and physically. Before he had even consumed the first leekless fruit, he already dared to fight against several people at once, let alone now. Do you want to be beaten up again? The instant Zhang Tai shouted that out, the arrogant smirks on the 4 froze. Zhang Tai's words were like a sharp dagger, directly reopening their scars. Sharon's face twisted. Right as he was about to charge forward, the spear in Zhang Tai's hand was a step faster, arriving right in front of his throat in an instant. With the spear in front of Sharon's jaw, the icy spearhead forced Charlon to swallow his words. Sharon instantly turned pale as he became drenched in sweat and stood still as if he was fixed in place, daring not to make even the slightest movement. Nobody from Glaze's group would have imagined that Zhang Tai could move so fast. Just now, Zhang Tai was just standing with the spear in hand. However, in the blink of an eye, much like a magic trick, the spear that had been in Zhang Tai's hand slid forward, stopped, and was raised. Those 3 motions were done fluidly like water. Before they had even been able to respond, Zhang Tai's spear had already appeared before Sharon's chin. Zhang Tai's actions was too fast. It was fast, fierce, and accurate. In an instant, he had frightened all 4 of them. The moment Zhang Tai shot out his spear, a cold and fierce aura surged around him, and even the other 3 could feel it. At that moment, they felt as if the aura of the spear had completely pierced through Sharon's neck, causing them to feel a chill on their backs. How is this guy so vicious? We didn't notice this back at school. The other 3 immediately turned pale. Just as Glaze was about to pull out the weapon on his waist, Zhang Tai's spear, once again, retracted all of a sudden as if nothing had happened. Zhang Tai, like before, once again went on his way, rudely colliding into Sharon as he pushed him away and left with big strides. 7 or 8 steps away, while Zhang Tai was recalling the casual feeling he had when he shot out his spear, he heard the quick steps of Glaze's group chasing behind him. His auditory sense had become greatly sensitive since his spiritual energy suddenly surged. Zhang Tai cursed inside and was determined to give them a lesson. He had once been told by Donder that for these kinds of bastards, you must beat them up fiercely when you have the opportunity. Bastards! Zhang Tai turned around as he gave a thunder-like roar. His roar had frightened Glaze's group, who were about to catch up to him. Even the attention of the many people in the square had been attracted at this moment, causing them to turn to their direction. In a split second, everybody in the square, including both the male students and the female students, all turned and stared at them, resulting in the entire square becoming quiet. Earlier when Glaze's group had blocked Zhang Tai at the gate of the castle, they had already attracted some people's attention. However, now, because of Zhang Tai's voice, everyone's attention was attracted. Do not follow me anymore, and stay away from me. I like women, not men. Even if you take off your trousers and kneel in front of me, I will still not be interested in your disgusting butts. I'll say it again, I like women. Continuing, Zhang Tai exclaimed furiously, in order to get rid of you, instead of hunting, I have decided to be a minor. Yet, you guys are still trying to give me trouble? You guys want to use that stinky bit of meat in your hands to lure me? I will tell you again, I am a man and I like women. I am not interested in your filthy game where you pretend to be men in public but become eunuchs in private. Stay away from me with that wolf hide that you use in your filthy game. If you keep following me shamelessly, don't blame me for using my spear to destroy your anus, letting your wish be fulfilled. Zhang Tai's words were fast and sharp, but the information it contained was too great, too terrifying, and too scandalous. After several seconds, the silent square suddenly burst into an uproar. Hundreds of people, regardless of whether they were male or female, released their gossipy souls and immediately surrounded them as they began to stare at Zhang Tai, then the faces of Glaze's group, then the sheep carried by Garner and Zuhair, and finally the wolf hide used in their filthy game that was carried by Sharon. It was obvious that these four guys were chasing after the guy who was about to go to the mines. Looking at the wolf hides, some guys in the crowd had even thought of something and started to vomit as they bent over. Hearing Zhang Tai's words, Glaze's group felt blood rushing to their heads. They were at a loss for words. You bastard. Don't talk nonsense. Zuhair furiously pointed at Zhang Tai. Under the weird look in the eyes of the people around them, Zuhair became upset and could only weakly refute. At the same time, the crowd started to murmur to each other. Yes, I am a bastard. If you don't follow me anymore, then you can call me whatever you want. Zhang Tai heaved a deep sigh towards the sky. You just can't force me to do that. Zuhair, I like women. Zhang Tai pointed at the female students surrounding them. I like to be surrounded by women that are like water fairies with big breasts and plump butts. Ah, they are my babies. What I desire the most is for innocent love between my favorite girl and me. If you promise to me in the public that you will no longer follow me, then I will definitely explain to everyone that what I had just said was nonsense. Then, you can just go and continue doing whatever you want on the wolf hide. From his surroundings came another sound of vomiting. The gaze of many fell onto the wolf hide held by Sharon. In a split second, instead of wolf hides, Sharon felt like as if he was holding a hot sheet of iron. Especially when he saw the frightened look in the eyes of the girls that surrounded them as they covered their mouths in horror, Sharon trembled all over. It's all over. We can't even dream of having beauties anymore. You disgusting bastards. He has already been driven to the point of mining by you. Why are you still here? Piss off right now. Don't dirty Wild Wolf Castle. Someone in the crowd started to curse at them loudly. Afterwards, Glaze's group was immediately buried by curses. Yeah, they are too shameless. How could they be this shameless? You didn't know? Some male students in their youth would be very depressed. If they are poorly self-disciplined, they might even do something strange. That's too disgusting. Once I see those wolf hides, I can't help but want to vomit. I have both heard and seen what happened. Just then, when this student was getting ready to mine and leave the castle, right when he left the gate, these students, who were in ambush, had blocked him. They had even tried to make him succumb to them by using the meat, but the student who was preparing to go mining just ignored them. After pushing away that guy with wolf hide in his hand, he wanted to leave. Unexpectedly, they caught up with him. Another voice rose up from among the crowd, explaining what had happened just now. I can also testify. These four bastards are from our 7th National Male Middle School. Everybody in 7th National Male Middle School could tell you that after these guys' bodies started to develop, they formed a small group that did not get along with the others. Every noon, they would go for lunch together, never leaving a single one behind. Normal male students would never do that. In the past, I had always been curious about this, but now I finally understand. The explanation was so timely that Zhang Tai couldn't help but raise his thumb in his mind. This guy was truly good at using words, especially when he said bodies developed together, and a small group that did not get along with the others. Those words were truly great, too realistic, and really lets people's imagination go wild. Right. It was just like that. I am also from 7th National Male Middle School. I can also testify. All the surrounding horny students from 7th National Male Middle School became spirited. They started to attack Glaze's group like beating mice in the street, wanting to completely destroy the reputation of Glaze's group. It was too despicable, too shameless, too disgusting. This was the largest scandal of this year's survival training. Among the crowd, some of the guys who had exchanged their meat for wild vegetables and fruits from the girls couldn't help but throw the wild vegetables and fruits at the heads of the members of Glaze's group. Piss off! Piss off! Piss off! There were all sorts of curses thrown towards Glaze's group. Everybody, including both males and females, was glaring at them, and a look of disgust could be seen in their eyes. Even now, Glaze was still confused about how he had been humiliated so miserably in such a short period of time. Earlier, he was planning to show off in the castle square in order to attract some female students. However, he had unexpectedly met Zhang Tai, so he wanted to give him a lesson by humiliating him horribly. After being hit by 2 wild fruits on his head and seeing the resentful and regretful look on Zhang Tai, Glaze was completely infuriated and felt the blood all over his body rushing to his head and boiling like magma. With the sound of shing, Glaze pulled out the sword from the sheath hanging on his waist, immediately silencing the curses from the people around him. Seeing his actions, everyone in the audience took 2 steps back. Seeing Glaze's response, Zuhair's face became twisted. He wanted to stop Glaze, but he was too late. With eyes turning red, Glaze gazed at Zhang Tai and chopped towards Zhang Tai as he howled, "I'll kill you." Seeing Glaze's actions, the surrounding female students were shocked and screamed out loudly. Holding his spear tightly, Zhang Tai took a defensive posture. However, Zhang Tai was not nervous in the least, as he had noticed a certain figure in the crowd just now. Although Glaze moved fast, that figure moved faster. The instant Glaze charged at Zhang Tai, he had already been forced back and was sent flying backwards faster than when he had just charged, crashing onto the ground with a loud bang. Glaze felt dazed. Before he was able to pick himself up from the ground, he heard an icy voice. According to Andaman Alliance's wartime decree, anyone who dares to pull out their sword and attack another student in public can, at worst, be punished with the death penalty. The figure standing in the ring of students said coldly, causing Glaze's group to immediately turn pale. "Teacher," Zuhair wanted to explain, but the figure casually raised her hand as she harumphed, "Shut up." Hearing the teacher's order, Zuhair became silent. "Considering that this is your first time making such a mistake, you have not harmed anyone yet, and it was not easy for you to become a LV-2 fighter before the survival training, I will simply give you the punishment of having to stay 10 kilometers away from Wild Wolf Castle for 1 month. Now, before I change my mind, take your things and immediately get out of here." After saying that, the figure flicked her hand, throwing Glaze's sword, which she had just grabbed, back into the sheath hanging on Glaze's waist. Seeing that sword flying towards him, Glaze's heart almost stopped. At that moment, the only thing that Glaze could imagine was the scene of the colorful leopard that had been nailed into the ground by Captain Curlin's spear. It was only when the sword had entered his sheath did his heart began to beat again. His back had already been drenched with cold sweat. Having realized that what he had done was truly reckless, Glaze did not dare to say anything and only gave Zhang Tai a vicious glare. Saying nothing at all, Glaze left the square of Wild Wolf Castle with his followers under the weird stares and jeers of the audience. Zhang Tai realized that, after this incident, he and Glaze could be considered as eternal enemies. However, he wasn't afraid, the god of time was standing on his side. Some of the female students in the crowd started to show their courtesy to that figure who had helped Zhang Tai. "Miss Chili." The audience also started to leave. Zhang Tai also wanted to slip away at this moment. However, unfortunately for him, the basket on his back was truly too conspicuous. The moment he moved, he was noticed by others. "As for you," hearing her words, Zhang Tai immediately became still. Turning around, he forced an innocent smile, but unfortunately, Zhang Tai didn't receive a warm response. Instead, slight traces of disgust could be seen in the eyes of Miss Chili. It was as if that woman was staring at a toad who was drooling uncontrollably. You are also a shameless rascal. You are not a good student either. In the following period of the survival training, if you dare to stay alone with any female student for over 3 minutes, I will chop off your hands. Hearing such a punishment, Zhang Tai became shocked. He could not believe that the boring woman called Chili would force him to be a bachelor in the survival training. What an abnormal punishment. *T. Seeing as the crowd had left, Zhang Tai, who was just given a punishment, had also intended to leave the square as he gloomily lowered his head. From this incident, Zhang Tai also suffered a great loss. He didn't know whether he should cry or laugh. While walking, Zhang Tai's head suddenly collided with something soft and springy. Raising his head, Zhang Tai saw a beautiful girl who was covering her magnificent breasts with her hands. The instant Zhang Tai saw that pair of breasts, Zhang Tai sighed inside, "Wow, they are so big." At that moment, the girl's face was as red as her hair. A familiar, beautiful face with willow leaf-like eyebrows looked at him. Before Zhang Tai was able to apologize, the girl had already opened her mouth. "I have plump breasts and butts, so what? Who's your baby? I know you bastards have long dreamt of sleeping with me. You didn't forget me at all and always have me in your mind. These past couple of days, you must have thought about doing terrifying and disgusting things to me numerous times. I'm warning you. Do not those disgusting things to me in your mind anymore. Don't think about me in your mind. You rascal, you deserve to be ked by those perverts." The girl kept talking as if she was shooting bullets from a machine gun that was used before the catastrophe. After she finished speaking, she kicked Zhang Tai's leg with her pointy deerskin boots and ran away. Was she talking to me? She wasn't talking to me, right? Zhang Tai became speechless for quite a while. He then looked to his right, his left, and behind him, finding nobody else. Finally, thinking about that girl's unreasonable kick, Zhang Tai felt a sharp pain on his shin and started to shriek miserably. Hugging his leg, he jumped up from the ground. Chapter 75, You Will Get Nothing From Me. What a bad woman. What a crazy and lecherous woman. Who the *CK knows you? Who the *CK is thinking about you? You'd better stay out of my sight. If I see you again, I'll tie you up and humph. Continuing on his way, he walked like a cripple as he used his spear as a crutch. Every time he thought back to how that woman had cursed him and kicked his shin, he would curse her. Like the male students from the national male middle schools, the female students from the national female middle schools were taught some fighting skills, and thus they were not as weak as normal women. In contrast, they were much more aggressive. Needless to say, those skills were targeted at men. At the very least, from that kick to his shin alone, Zhang Tai already felt that that red-haired woman with plump breasts had very powerful and fast kicks. Given that she had also targeted a cunning and accurate spot to attack, it seemed that she had always been practicing this skill. First, I framed Glaze's group, then following that I was framed by another person. Is this karma? Will those framing others always be framed? Zhang Tai started to feel frightened and awe-stricken. In the past, Zhang Tai could almost be considered an atheist, as he held no beliefs. However, ever since he obtained the Castle of Black Iron, his atheist view had gradually begun to collapse. In Zhang Tai's opinion, both the Manjusaka fruit tree and the space in the Castle of Black Iron had already surpassed the limits that human beings could reach. Besides God, Zhang Tai could not think of another being that could create such things. But, what was a god? Was there truly a god out there that controlled everything, one who spins the wheel of fate? Zhang Tai would never have imagined that the resentment between him and Glaze's group would reach such a stage. Honestly, when Zhang Tai turned around earlier and cursed at Glaze's group, he was only planning to make a joke, intending to turn them into laughingstocks, but they had instead been dealt a harsh punishment. Zhang Tai finally realized what Donder's words meant. A soft tongue can break hard bones. Language was an invisible, sharp blade that could kill people. After leaving Wild Wolf Castle, Zhang Tai went around the iron mine near the Wild Wolf Castle. Even though it was daytime, he was still not able to see anything a dozen meters ahead of him after entering the cave. As he had no other choice, Zhang Tai turned back, realizing that he needed a torch to mine within. After having been ferociously kicked by that damned woman, Zhang Tai's shin became swollen, thus he couldn't freely move. As he didn't have any lighting tools, Zhang Tai decided to turn back. Walking around the pine trees in Wild Wolf Valley, Zhang Tai was hoping to find wood that could be used as a torch and pine resin. As he knew it might be dangerous in the forest, Zhang Tai didn't dare to venture too deep alone. The wood that could be ignited easily were the ones by the trunk that had been soaked in a great amount of pine resin that was secreted from the trees. Compared to the other parts of the pine tree, the wood of the trunk was much easier to burn. Once it had been chopped off the tree, one could, without even drying it, ignite the wood. The wood could burn for a long time because the fire would not be able to be easily extinguished. Having been immersed in pine resin, they were the best natural torch in the wild. As there were many wild pine trees in Wild Wolf Valley, one would be able to see many pine trees with diameters greater than 3 m everywhere. Arriving at the forest of pine trees, Zhang Tai saw many people, both male and female, at the edge of the forest. There were many treasures in the forest of pine trees. For example, pine resin had multiple purposes, pine cones could be consumed, and there were even many delicious foods, like wild vegetables and mushrooms that grew quickly during the rainy season between May and August, that could be found on the ground beside the rotting pine needles. Pine needles were even edible if they were fresh and had been placed in boiling water for a while. Even the wood from the pine trees of Wild Wolf Valley could meet many of the people's basic needs. While the female students collected pine resin, pine cones, wild vegetables, and mushrooms in the forest, the male students were doing laborious work. Especially when noticed by the girls, they would work even harder as they madly chopped the pine trees, as the wood from the trees were great firewood for making coal. "Brother, can you do me a favor?" Catching sight of Zhang Tai wandering the forest with an eye-catching basket on his back, a male student who was chopping wood stopped him. "What can I do for you?" Zhang Tai moved over in a manner akin to a cripple. "Brother, are you here to look for a torch to bring with you to the mines?" Zhang Tai was amazed at that guy's good observation skills as he nodded. "That's great. This pine tree should have a lot of wood that could be easily ignited. Help me out and we'll chop this tree together, then we can cut it into 3 sections. You can take all the easily ignited wood, the pine resin, and half the pine cones. How about it?" Glancing over at the pine tree that was as broad as a person's waist, Zhang Tai saw the flowing pine resin and the many places on the body of the tree covered with a thick layer of pine resin. He estimated that the amount of wood that could be used as firewood inside was not little. Even if he couldn't find any firewood, Zhang Tai would still be able to make a few torches since there was so much pine resin on it. "Fine." Zhang Tai immediately put down his basket and took turns with the other male student to chop down the tree. After chopping the tree for a while, Wood directly passed his axe to Zhang Tai, letting him continue with his axe, and threw himself to the ground, resting to the side as he idly chatted with Zhang Tai. "I'm Wood, what's your name?" "I'm Zhang Tai. Are you from the 2nd National Male Middle School?" "Yeah. What's wrong with your leg?" "I was kicked by a mad woman." Zhang Tai gloomily answered as he continued to brandish his axe. "Haha, brother, you can't use force against women. My mom once told me that men need to pretend to be gentlemen in front of women. Even though you can't wait and want to throw them onto the bed, you definitely can't show it. Instead, you must coax them. When you want to sleep with them, you have to ask whether they'd like to take a rest." Wood laughed out loudly as he pointed at Zhang Tai's basket. "Also, if you want to attract women, you shouldn't be mining. No woman wants their man to be a miner." "This guy is really interesting," Zhang Tai said inside. However, he immediately retorted, "Does that mean they prefer their husband to be a charcoal maker? It was my fiancée who told me to make coal here. She didn't want me to attract too much attention and wanted me to pay attention to my own safety." Thinking over it, making charcoal was the best option, Wood replied proudly. "You already have a wife?" Zhang Tai stared at Wood in amazement. "Of course, we grew up together in a courtyard since we were young. 2 years ago, when we played outside, I asked whether she would take a rest, then I made her my wife. She's in another school. After this survival training, we will be engaged. Brother, you need to learn from me on this aspect." Wood's words struck Zhang Tai once again. Zhang Tai realized that his relationship with the female students has been poor recently. Ever since he left school, he could not see Miss Dana anymore. When he was going to sleep with Miss Anna, he found out he needed to be circumcised. On the 3rd day since the start of the survival training, he was forbidden by that damned Chile to stay with girls for more than 3 minutes. Afterwards, he was even fiercely kicked by an insane girl. Damn it. Being compared to Wood, he was really envious. That foolish-looking guy had already gotten to enjoy the taste of a woman at least 2 years ago. In contrast, he had not even touched a girl's hand. Feeling as if he had taken a blow, Zhang Tai became speechless. He just lowered his head and kept brandishing the axe, seriously treating the pine tree as an enemy. Zhang Tai's good strength really startled Wood. Finally, under Zhang Tai's persistent efforts during the past 10 more minutes of brandishing the axe at a high frequency, the pine tree slowly inclined as it fell to the ground, accompanied by the sounds of cracking. The falling of the pine tree attracted the attention of the 3 nearby girls who were carrying baskets, causing them to come over. Among the 3 that came over, one was a blonde beauty, while the other 2 were more beautiful than the average girl. They were all beautiful girls who were pleasing to the eye. "Hello, can you gift us with the pine cones from the tree?" The girl speaking was definitely a beauty. She had blonde hair and a slim frame, her face was a snow white that was akin to milk, her voice was as fair-sounding as that of a yellow warbler. Her smile was as warm as the sunshine, and her attitude was perfectly sincere. At the sight of such a perfect beauty, Wood's face blushed. He then raised his chest and said generously, "No problem. However, half of pine cones on this tree belong to him. If you want the other half, you have to gain his approval." Saying this, Wood pointed to his side at Zhang Tai, who was panting as he held onto the handle of the axe. The blonde-haired beauty kept smiling as she moved her eyes onto Zhang Tai. Zhang Tai, who was extremely dejected at that moment, glanced at her. Recalling the abnormal punishment he had received, he finally lost his temper. "Beauty? To me, a beauty is as useful as a fart right now. I can't eat nor can I touch them. They might even lose their temper and kick me," Zhang Tai thought inside. Zhang Tai then immediately refuted her. "No way, I will take away all of my pine cones. I won't give you even one." Hearing Zhang Tai's words, the sunshine-like smile on that blonde-haired beauty immediately froze. Her face then became cold as if it were covered in frost, and the other girls beside her stared at Zhang Tai with mouths agape. Such a rude guy. Such a rough guy. This was their first time encountering such a person. Even Wood was staring at Zhang Tai in amazement. He started to doubt whether Zhang Tai had felt stimulation before. Afterwards, without caring about the people staring at him, Zhang Tai directly lowered his mining basket and ran over to pick up the pine cones. Seeing Zhang Tai's movements, the other girls looked at each other before they also ran over to pick pine cones as fast as possible. 1. Type of bird. Chapter 76, Achievements. Zhang Tai's actions were fast and had enough strength. He was also the first to act. In contrast, the 3 girls were weaker and were slower to act. As the difficulty of picking pine cones was higher than Peach's, they were on even grounds. There were at least 70 to 80 pine cones on the tree. Not intending to show even the slightest bit of courtesy, Zhang Tai's 2 hands, which were as nimble as a monkey's, grabbed the bigger ones. Seeing Zhang Tai's attitude, the girls, one by one, began to grit their teeth. Although the pine cones they got were smaller, what irritated them more was this annoying guy, who ignored their charm, as he grabbed the pine cones in front of them, treating it as a big deal. Seeing the 2 parties moving faster and becoming increasingly more ferocious, Wood, who stood to the side, touched his head and became really speechless. It seems that he finally knew why Zhang Tai had been kicked by that girl. He was not like a gentleman in the least when in front of girls. He completely deserved it. After a short while, under their collective efforts, all the pine cones on the tree, with the exception of the last, medium-sized pine cone that hung on a twig, were picked off. At the same time, Zhang Tai and that blonde-haired girl both stretched out their hand, intending to grab it. The instant the girl's finger touched the pine cone, it suddenly disappeared right in front of her eyes. Zhang Tai had directly broken the twig, snatching the pine cone away. Watching Zhang Tai slowly remove the twig from the pine cone and casually throwing it into the ugly mining basket on his back, all 3 girls stood up and glared at the ruthless guy, Zhang Tai, who lacked any traces of being a gentleman. "What's your name?" The blonde-haired beauty glared at Zhang Tai. "If you offend us, you will be the enemy of us, the Rose Association." "I'm Zhang Tai." Seeing the angered look on the 3 girls, not knowing why, Zhang Tai felt the discomfort in his heart disappear and arrived at a certain conclusion: if one was not feeling well, one could transfer their discomfort onto others, and thus immediately allowing the self to feel better. "Good, I've remembered you." After she finished speaking, the blonde-haired girl wanted to leave. "You better not miss me." Noticing that they were leaving, Zhang Tai hurriedly shouted. "Humph, humph." A girl with freckles on her face raised her chin and gave a proud smile. "You rude guy, it's already too late for you to apologize to us. We from the Rose Association are not that easily bullied." "No, I think you misunderstood. My meaning was you better not miss me, and especially do not dream of doing those disgusting and terrifying things to me in your dreams when you miss me." Hearing Zhang Tai's words, the girls gaped as their faces turned pale. After glaring at Zhang Tai and calling him a bastard, they turned around and immediately left. Zhang Tai realized that his heart finally felt refreshed. This depression transfer method was really useful. At this time, Wood, who was standing by the side, raised his thumb towards Zhang Tai. "Brother, I think I understand now. What have you understood?" Zhang Tai curiously asked. "My mom had told me that what men were afraid of the most was being unable to leave an impression in the mind of the woman they liked. For a man to succeed, if they could not cause the woman to fall in love with them at first sight, then the best alternative was to make that woman hate them during the first encounter. A woman's heart is very miraculous. Even though they might hate you at first, they might very well fall in love with you later. Weren't you using this method?" Seeing Zhang Tai's shocked expression, before Zhang Tai was even able to open his mouth, Wood hurriedly stopped him and patted his shoulder. "No need to deny it. We are both men. I understand." Afterwards, working together with Wood for another 2 hours, they were finally able to divide the pine tree into 3 sections. Zhang Tai obtained more than 250 g of pine resin and more than 10 kilograms of firewood, which were enough to make 5 or 6 torches. Zhang Tai put them into his awkward mining basket and left the forest of pine trees. While Zhang Tai was busy chopping the pine tree, Glaze group had stealthily slid back to their base. Since Glaze felt that he was stronger than the others and wanted to show off, the 4 of them had set base at a location that was 10 kilometers away from Wild Wolf Castle. The 4 had set base in a natural mountain cave on a cliff that was 6 m above the ground. In order to enter the cave, they would have to climb down a vine of the tree above the cliff. Although it was far from Wild Wolf Castle, they would not be threatened by common beasts here. This could be considered a decent location. The atmosphere in the mountain cave was depressing. It was dead silent. This time, Glaze did not lose his temper nor did he shout loudly. Instead, he calmed down expressionlessly. However, the more silent Glaze was, the more the other 3 felt uneasy. After being silent for a long time, Glaze finally opened his mouth. "Zuhair, if I stealthily enter Zhang Tai's base and chop off his head, do you think there'll be a problem?" Hearing Glaze's question, the other 3 quivered at the same time as they felt a terrifying and cruel air from Glaze's calm tone. "Since the conflict between him and us have been made public today, everyone knows that you want to kill him. So, if you kill him during the survival training, you would be the first to be suspected and would definitely be investigated by the Temporary Inspection Committee. The 4 leading teachers in the Temporary Inspection Committee are all great and fierce. I also don't know what means they would use to investigate you. If you go kill him, it would be difficult to ensure that you haven't left any evidence." Zuhair forcefully swallowed his saliva and glanced at Glaze as he chose his words carefully. "Today's conflict was completely out of our expectation. If things went according to our original plan this afternoon, then he would be suffering for the next couple of days. We only need to slightly adjust our original plan, and we would be able to kill him. These past few days, we have already found a wolf den. Luckily, Zhang Tai chose to be a miner alone. Not only is Zhang Tai looking for his own death, but the gods have even gifted us such an opportunity. He's definitely dead this time. For the next couple of days, I will stealthily follow him and grasp his habits. Afterwards, we can carry out our plans against him. That Berwick should also die. Anyone who blocks my path ahead should die," Glaze ferociously said. "That Berwick is more cunning than Zhang Tai. Ever since we arrived at Wild Wolf Valley, he has already made precautions against our revenge. Right now, he has a certain degree of influence and has more than 200 people on his side. These past few days, they have been practicing how to hunt prey. At any time and any place, there would be a large number of people around him, making it hard for us to find an opportunity to kill him. If we really want to deal with him, we will have to think of another way. According to the usual arrangement of survival training in the past years, there would be a competition between students from different schools. If Berwick wants to stand out in the final competition, he has to get a good rank. When the time comes, you just need to find an opportunity to pretend to make a mistake and heavily wound or kill him." But, Zuhair stopped talking. "But what? Berwick is already a LV-1 fighter, and he's not much weaker than you. He is also cunning and good at hiding his real strength. If you fight him in the ring, he might find a way to escape. Not much weaker than me?" The corner of Glaze's mouth raised into a cold smile. Glancing over the 3 in the cave, Glaze asked, "Do you think only others will improve or hide their strength, and I will stay a LV-2 fighter forever?" "Glaze, you," Sharon showed a face of surprise. "At most, it will take me 2 weeks to ignite the second burning point on my spine. Once I do that, I will become a LV-3 fighter," Glaze's eyes seemed to shine with ghost fire. In the final competition, I will definitely find an opportunity to kill Berwick. The moment I start to control my own fate, you will also start to control your own fates with my favor. They no longer talked about Zhang Tai. Previously, when Zhang Tai went against them at school, Zuhair had already thought up of a fierce plan to take revenge on Zhang Tai during the survival training. After today's incident, they were more determined to take revenge on Zhang Tai. A few of them didn't even think Zhang Tai would be able to defend against their revenge. In their eyes, Zhang Tai was just a rude and brainless, trivial figure who dared to go against them and sought his own death, while Berwick was the one who could really threaten Glaze's position at school. At school, there were even rumors that some teachers thought that Berwick was better than Glaze. Once Berwick found an opportunity to stand out in the survival training, he would be able to obtain a recommendation. Certainly, Glaze would not allow for such a thing to happen. When Zhang Tai with his awkward mining basket finally returned to the trap that he had set in the hidden stream, it was already afternoon. The afterglow from the setting sun started to scatter off Wild Wolf Valley. Seeing that none of the traps he had set in the forest were able to catch prey, Zhang Tai was slightly disappointed. On his way back, Zhang Tai had paid attention to whether he had been followed by the others or not. During this time, he pretended to be wandering about in the forest. Seeing that nobody was following him, he stealthily slid to that stream. When he arrived at one side of the stream, Zhang Tai was still somewhat nervous. After all, this was his first attempt. He was not sure that he could capture fish. After taking a deep breath, Zhang Tai moved away the twigs that sat above the pond. The scene in front of him immediately surprised him. There were 8 fish joyfully swimming in the pond, 5 of which were grass carps. The other 3 were much longer than a chopstick, and each weighed at least 2 kilograms. On their jet black backs, one could see 2 pale golden lines. Seeing all of this, Zhang Tai became really excited. Chapter 77, Golden Threadfin Bream. When Zhang Tai came back to the tree with the mining basket on his back, he found that Barley, Doug, Hista, Baghdad, and Sharwin had already returned. As Leet was on duty for the second half of the night, he was tired and was currently resting under the tree. Once Zhang Tai saw the listless faces of Doug and Sharwin, he realized that the 5 must have obtained nothing at all. For several green birds who lacked experience, catching prey for the first time was pretty unlikely. Sitting under that dragonclaw tree, they turned around and saw Zhang Tai's ugly mining basket. "You're really going to be a miner?" Barley asked. "Of course, look at my equipment." "Oh, I encountered Glaze's group near Wild Wolf Castle today," Zhang Tai said. Hearing Zhang Tai's words, the rest became nervous. "Did they give you trouble?" Leet asked. "They dare to push around our brother? Let's go and find them to settle the score right now." Doug directly picked himself up from the ground, intending to go get his weapon. Zhang Tai hurriedly pressed down on Doug's shoulder. "They didn't bully me. Actually, it was me who bullied them a bit." "You bullied them?" Barley cried out. "Did you wound them?" "No." "Then what happened?" At their request, Zhang Tai told them what had happened between him and Glaze's group in the square. Hearing that Glaze's group were chased out of the square as people threw wild vegetables and fruits at them, all the members of the Hitplane Brotherhood laughed out loudly as they rolled here and there on the ground. Hista had even laughed so hard he began to tear up. "Haha. That's too marvelous, truly too marvelous." I really want to see their expressions at that moment. For several men to use wolf hides to make love, that's too disgusting, too dirty. But, I like it. Ha ha ha, Baghdad slapped his thigh. "Big head, I really haven't seen though you. Usually, you look very innocent. I would never have imagined that you would do something like this. This move of yours is truly vicious. I'm afraid Glaze's group wouldn't be able to find any girls who would be willing to partner with them for this survival training. Haha. I've decided. In the future, if I get into a similar incident, I will use the same trick to deal with those annoying guys. This trick is cooler than slapping their face, and also lets me vent a little." Hista obscenely smiled, causing both his eyes and his mouth to turn into arcs. The group of brothers laughed for a long time before they, one by one, stopped smiling and got down to business. "Take care of yourself. After this incident, I'm afraid Glaze's group might take revenge on you more fiercely." Seeing Zhang Tai, Barley seriously said. "Perhaps for you to be working in the mines over there is a good choice. The mines over there are not too far away from Wild Wolf Castle, and there are always people going and coming over there. Glaze's group of 4 wouldn't dare to recklessly look for you to give you trouble. However, whenever you are alone in the wild, they might try to plot against you. That Zuhair guy is definitely a poison snake who can come up with many vicious tricks. Zhang Tai casually shrugged his shoulders. Forget them. Even if today's incident didn't happen, their group of 4 wouldn't have let me off anyways. Let's talk about something else. How were your harvests today? The ones who went hunting today all spread their hands with the palm side up. Don't mention it. We saw some praise, but before we even caught up to them, they had already escaped, Sharwin helplessly said. And those wild wolves. They are too cunning. It won't be easy at all for us to catch them. Trying to capture a boar, Baghdad almost fell into a ravine. There were too many people hunting over there, so many of the prey were already scared away. Bringing the Iron Gate T-21 over there is also a good option, but it's too heavy. If we bring it with us, it'll affect our movement. This weapon can only be used at a fixed location. That's right. Today, we met a guy who was very powerful and brought with him a bow. In just an afternoon, he was able to hunt 2 wild deer. From his looks, he shouldn't be weaker than Glaze. Hearing their words, Zhang Tai could already imagine what they had experienced this afternoon. It was really miserable for them. Oh right, how was your harvest today? Barley asked Zhang Tai as he stared at the mining basket with a slight frown. Is there something inside? Hearing Barley's words, Zhang Tai patted his head, realizing that he had forgotten that he had not yet put down his mining basket and took out the goods from within. I almost forgot. Tonight, I will invite all of you to drink fish soup. Zhang Tai generously smiled. Hearing the word fish, everybody's eyes began to shine. Even in Black Hot City, fish was very expensive, and they could only eat it a couple of times a year, let alone here. Although you caught a fish, I'm afraid it might not be enough for the 7 of us. As he spoke to this point, his eyes almost popped out because Zhang Tai had put down the mining basket and removed everything inside, revealing 3 big fish wrapped in water weeds. Although more than 20 minutes had already passed since they were put in the mining basket, they were still alive. The moment they were placed on the ground, 2 of the fish were taking deep breaths as they flopped on the ground, while the other fish jumped once. Besides Barley, the other horny animals also stared with wide-opened eyes, as they realized that the 3 fish together weighed at least 7 to 8 kilograms, which was enough for everyone to eat. Grab them. We'll clean them in the stream over there. After we remove their scales and innards, we can boil them in the pot. Zhang Tai hurriedly grabbed the most lively fish, while the other 2 fish were consecutively grabbed by the other 2 drooling, horny animals. Barley had also grabbed one of the fish. When he saw the golden line on the back of the fish, he exclaimed, "No way. It's a golden threadfin bream. You know this fish? We can't eat it?" Zhang Tai became worried. If these fish couldn't be consumed by humans, he would be mocked and called a big head by the others. Haha. This is the best freshwater fish we can enjoy in Black Hot City. Brothers, we will have a luxurious supper tonight. Barley laughed out loudly. Hearing Barley's words, everybody cheered up. After realizing that they would have fish to eat tonight, the depressed guys immediately became spirited. Just for a few fish, they began to delicately distribute the work that needed to be done. Some boiled water, others added firewood to the fire, while the others killed the fish. All in a sudden, the tree base was brimming with joy. While cleaning the fish in the stream, Doug made a mistake and let the fish slip out of his hand. The moment the fish into the water, it had tried to swim away. Thankfully, the stream was neither wide nor deep, it was only about 20 to 30 centimeters in depth. After the collective, hasty efforts of a few people, they were finally able to capture that fish. Although most of their clothes had been soaked, they all still felt very happy. Don't throw away the innards. Cover them with tree leaves and leave them to me. I will use them. Seeing that Leet was about to throw them away, Zhang Tai hurriedly stopped him and grabbed some large tree leaves to wrap the innards of the fish. This stuff can't be eaten. Why do you want to leave them? Doug curiously asked. We can't eat them, but that doesn't mean other animals can't. Zhang Tai showed a mysterious smile. After being cleaned, the golden threadfin breams were cut into pieces and placed into the pot with boiling water. Sharwin fetched a handful of wild pepper and sprayed them inside along with a bit salt. Soon after, when the water in the pot was boiling again, the aroma of fish soup drifted out from the pot, causing everyone to drool. The color of the fish soup had turned into a milky color. When the others saw it, their appetite greatly increased, and they all forcefully swallowed their saliva. Everyone greatly enjoyed this supper. Every one of them hated for it to end as they all licked their bowls clean. 3 fish were used to cook the pot of soup, and in the end, not a single drop of soup or a single piece of fish was left. That golden threadfin bream was truly delicious. With the exception of Barley, this was the first time the others had eaten something this delicious. After eating to their fill, everyone sat around the campfire and chatted. To sate their curiosity, Zhang Tai told them everything about trapping the fish, including the principle behind it and the location. Hearing that Zhang Tai could easily capture fish with such a method, every member's mouth gaped. As he moved the firewood under the huge pot to improve the roasting of the pine cones, he imparted to the others his method of trapping fish. He had buried those pine cones under the ash from the firewood. Once firm pine cones were heated, they would expand and thus expose the pine nuts inside. Zhang Tai picked a well-roasted pine cone and threw it to Doug. Drooling, Doug opened the pine cone and started to chew on the pine nut as he mumbled. "Big head, so to say, does this mean that even if you don't do anything, you would still be able to easily get 1 kilogram of food every day? Haha, if I get less than 1 kilogram of fish a day, then it will belong to me, but if I get more than 1 kilogram of fish a day, then I will share the rest with you guys. It isn't just me who has enough food, but everyone," Zhang Tai explained as he smiled. "Actually, I think we should still think over it. There are still many kinds of hunting methods. For example, Glaze has a powerful fighting force, so he directly catches his prey. There's also that bowman that you guys saw. He's extraordinary at archery, so he uses his bow to shoot his prey. Then there's Berwick. I heard that there are many people around him, so he takes advantage of their large numbers to catch prey. We can definitely learn from them. If we want to gather food and catch prey, then we have to use our strengths. None of us brothers could match Glaze when it comes to fighting strength, and neither could we match the number of people by Berwick's side. Since we are new here, we need to take some time to adapt to the environment and accumulate experience. I think we can take advantage of the time the others are using to adapt to the environment to try out some special methods." Hearing Zhang Tai's words, everybody's eyes began to shine. "What do you think is the best method for us to use to hunt prey?" Leet asked. "Others are using archery, their fighting strength, and the advantage in numbers. How about we try laying traps?" Zhang Tai suggested. Chapter 78, Trap Game. In any country, region, or time, education would have its natural defects and weaknesses. Education was designed for the interests and demands of the rulers. Since the rulers of Black Hot City required the schools to raise soldiers, farmers, and workers to support the operation of the city, most of the courses at school reflected this. They were related to and taught the basics required for those jobs, thus the students would never have the opportunity to learn to create traps that could capture low-level beasts. Even in the eyes of many teachers, creating and setting traps was not a skill that was necessary to be imparted at school, as the beasts that could be trapped were just worthless, low-level beasts like tigers and wolves. People above LV5 could already easily deal with those low-level beasts, even to the point of just tearing them by hand. Therefore, there was no need to set traps at all. If they had free time, it would be better spent in practicing cultivation, striving to ignite as many burning points in their body as possible. Not to mention that hunting was not a skill that was of importance in the eyes of the rulers of Black Hot City. In this age, personal fighting strength was king, while the other skills were not worth mentioning. As a result of their education, almost no student in Black Hot City, perhaps even in the Andaman Alliance, placed much importance to it. In fact, most of them knew nothing about traps. From Zhang Tai's memories, throughout his entire time at school, it seemed that it was only in last year's survival class did the teacher casually mention that it was sometimes effective to set traps in the wild. However, this was something that few students would pay attention to. Using traps was something used by those low-level pioneers who explored the wild. Naturally, they would not catch too many people's eyes. Had Zhang Tai not worked at the grocery store, he too would not have learned about traps. Coming to Wild Wolf Valley this time, Zhang Tai realized that he could really put the traps to use here. If he had not caught those golden threadfin breams earlier, Zhang Tai wouldn't have the confidence to encourage the others to set traps. Those golden threadfin breams made Zhang Tai realize that the knowledge imparted unto him by Dondar was rather valuable, at the very least during this survival training. Although they could learn a lot from the education provided in Black Hot City, they could learn much more from outside the high walls of Black Hot City. In the eyes of the other members of the Brotherhood, who had never learned about trapping skills, trapping was a difficult and mysterious skill that would only be used in boring night novels, where they were all brimming with killing tricks that would frighten people and cause them to be muddle-headed. However, in the end, night novels were completely fabricated by guys with too much time. After hearing Zhang Tai's explanation, everybody understood. In fact, everybody could grasp a powerful trapping skill, digging a hole. A 5 m deep pit was already able to trap most of the fierce beasts and common animals in Wild Wolf Valley. If any beast falls into the pits, they would become live targets for the Brotherhood, as any member of the Brotherhood could just use the Iron Gate T-21 that Barley had brought to shoot it to death. As usual, Zhang Tai woke up a bit later than 6 a.m. the next morning. The entire Wild Wolf Valley was still fast asleep, with the exception of a couple chirping birds and insects. Sharwin was still on duty. Zhang Tai climbed off the tree and walked to the stream to wash his face and rinse his mouth. Afterwards, Zhang Tai replaced Sharwin, letting him go sleep. Sitting by the tree hollow, he took the Iron Gate T-21 and waited for the other members to wake up. It was the 4th day since they had arrived here. Zhang Tai carefully stared at the Iron Gate T-21. Compared to the various portable bows that were created by the people before the catastrophe, Iron Gate T-21 was much more powerful. Zhang Tai had learned that the era before the catastrophe was a time when people used weapons with gunpowder and had too many powerful weapons to choose from, thus they did not pay much attention to the development of weapons that did not utilize gunpowder. However, in this age when weapons that did not use gunpowder became prominent in wars, development that once had nothing to do with weapons with no gunpowder were applied to them, resulting in them gradually becoming extremely powerful. In the eyes of the other members of the Brotherhood, who had never learned about trapping skills, trapping was a difficult and mysterious skill that would only be used in boring night novels, where they were all brimming with killing tricks that would frighten people and cause them to be muddle-headed. However, in the end, night novels were completely fabricated by guys with too much time. After hearing Zhang Tai's explanation, everybody understood. In fact, everybody could grasp a powerful trapping skill, digging a hole. A 5 m deep pit was already able to trap most of the fierce beasts and common animals in Wild Wolf Valley. If any beast falls into the pits, they would become live targets for the Brotherhood, as any member of the Brotherhood could just use the Iron Gate T-21 that Barley had brought to shoot it to death. As usual, Zhang Tai woke up a bit later than 6 a.m. the next morning. The entire Wild Wolf Valley was still fast asleep, with the exception of a couple chirping birds and insects. Sharwin was still on duty. Zhang Tai climbed off the tree and walked to the stream to wash his face and rinse his mouth. Afterwards, Zhang Tai replaced Sharwin, letting him go sleep. Sitting by the tree hollow, he took the Iron Gate T-21 and waited for the other members to wake up. It was the 4th day since they had arrived here. Zhang Tai carefully stared at the Iron Gate T-21. Compared to the various portable bows that were created by the people before the catastrophe, Iron Gate T-21 was much more powerful. Zhang Tai had learned that the era before the catastrophe was a time when people used weapons with gunpowder and had too many powerful weapons to choose from, thus they did not pay much attention to the development of weapons that did not utilize gunpowder. However, in this age when weapons that did not use gunpowder became prominent in wars, development that once had nothing to do with weapons with no gunpowder were applied to them, resulting in them gradually becoming extremely powerful. In the eyes of the other members of the Brotherhood, who had never learned about trapping skills, trapping was a difficult and mysterious skill that would only be used in boring night novels, where they were all brimming with killing tricks that would frighten people and cause them to be muddle-headed. However, in the end, night novels were completely fabricated by guys with too much time. After hearing Zhang Tai's explanation, everybody understood. In fact, everybody could grasp a powerful trapping skill, digging a hole. A 5 m deep pit was already able to trap most of the fierce beasts and common animals in Wild Wolf Valley. If any beast falls into the pits, they would become live targets for the Brotherhood, as any member of the Brotherhood could just use the Iron Gate T-21 that Barley had brought to shoot it to death. As usual, Zhang Tai woke up a bit later than 6 a.m. the next morning. The entire Wild Wolf Valley was still fast asleep, with the exception of a couple chirping birds and insects. Sharwin was still on duty. Zhang Tai climbed off the tree and walked to the stream to wash his face and rinse his mouth. Afterwards, Zhang Tai replaced Sharwin, letting him go sleep. Sitting by the tree hollow, he took the Iron Gate T-21 and waited for the other members to wake up. It was the 4th day since they had arrived here. Zhang Tai carefully stared at the Iron Gate T-21. Compared to the various portable bows that were created by the people before the catastrophe, Iron Gate T-21 was much more powerful. Zhang Tai had learned that the era before the catastrophe was a time when people used weapons with gunpowder and had too many powerful weapons to choose from, thus they did not pay much attention to the development of weapons that did not utilize gunpowder. However, in this age when weapons that did not use gunpowder became prominent in wars, development that once had nothing to do with weapons with no gunpowder were applied to them, resulting in them gradually becoming extremely powerful. Chapter 79, Being a Bit Famous. The first rain of June abruptly came. The sky was still clear 2 days ago, but on the evening of the same day, the sky became covered with dense clouds as heavy rain fell. It continued to rain until last night. Since it rained most of yesterday, most students chose to stay in their bases, and so did the members of Hit Plane Brotherhood. Barley fetched a set of cards, and those guys spent the entire day playing cards in the tree hollow. That was a marvelous feeling. While it was heavily raining outside the base, they really enjoyed themselves in the tree hollows. Besides the sound that came from the raindrops falling onto tree leaves, no other sounds could be heard, as the insects and the birds had already hidden themselves. They could no longer hear the chirping of cicadas and birds. As the animals had already hidden themselves in such weather, naturally, it was not that easy to hunt them. On the 8th day since the start of the survival training, God then allowed them 1 day of break. In the past 8 days, the tree base had been further renovated. When they had free time or had no firewood to burn, they further expanded the previous 3 levels of space, resulting in each of them having more space to sleep. They also hung a bamboo curtain, which they obtained by exchanging it for food with the girls, outside each of the tree holes. In addition, they also gathered several old vines, and in one night, wove them into a simple vine ladder for them to climb up and down. On the 3rd floor, they expanded several pits and moved in some soil, wildflowers, and green plants from the valley to make the tree base more pleasant. In the area under the tree, they dug a pond that was about 2 square meters and filled the bottom of the pond with pebbles and broken stones. They then dug a small ditch that was longer than 30 m and cut several pieces of bamboo. Using the bamboo, they split the ditch from the middle and placed the pieces of bamboo inside, effectively creating a miniature water diversion system, which they used to start cultivating fish in the pond. Although the water in the pond could easily seep into the ground, with the fresh water constantly flowing in, the depth of the water in the pond remained above 50 centimeters at all times, which was sufficient for the shoal of fish to survive. After such renovation, the tree base had become completely different than before. A couple of days ago, they successfully invited a group of female students to visit their tree base and ate roasted fish together. As expected, with such an appealing tree base, those girls were greatly amazed, so much that they even entered the tree base to have a look. After those girls returned to Wild Wolf Castle, they began to tell the other girls at Wild Wolf Castle, thus causing their tree base to be well known among girls. Many girls started to learn of the male students who lived in a huge tree base and farmed fish inside a pond under the tree, and they knew if they were to visit, they would be able to drink delicious fish soup and eat roasted fish. Besides, it seemed that those male students worked hard and were able to hunt other beasts. Generally speaking, those boys were always able to obtain a sufficient amount of food. Once they set out to hunt, they would always return with something. In order to allow the brothers of the Hit Plane Brotherhood to not leave empty-handed, Zhang Tai taught them how to dig those traps. In the recent days, under the collective hard work of the members of the Hit Plane Brotherhood, Barley and the rest had dug 2 traps that were deeper than 6 m at a location about 5 kilometers away from the tree base. These 2 traps, in addition to the fish trap that Zhang Tai made and the other traps made from twigs and stones to create small preys, greatly improved the living standard of the members of the Hit Plane Brotherhood. On the 6th day since the start of the survival training, they had successfully captured a wolf by placing the fish innards that oozed a fishy and terrible odor in the first pit. It was finally miserably shot to death by Iron Gate T-21. On the same day, the members of Hit Plane Brotherhood also enjoyed roasted wolf meat for the first time and acquired their first wolf hide in this survival training. After experiencing the success of the traps, every one of them thoroughly enjoyed setting traps. If it were not for the rain, they would have already made a 3rd deep pit. After they succeeded with their first trap, their tree base gradually became more and more famous. After feeling satisfied physically, the members of the Hit Plane Brotherhood started to dream about women. In the past couple of days, they had often frequented Wild Wolf Castle to pick up girls. Some of them had even successfully convinced some girls to work together to get through the survival training. For the girls, aside from having to return to Wild Wolf Castle each evening, they were free to do whatever they wanted. Realizing this, those male students worked harder. Many teams had gradually entered deeper into Wild Wolf Valley, as it was truly a paradise for beasts there. Naturally, they would be able to capture more difficult prey there. Wild Wolf Valley was naturally the paradise of wolves. In this age, even the species of wolves are categorized differently than the most universal categorization of animals. Wild wolves were the most common type, which did not differ to the wolves before the catastrophe. According to the most universal classification of animals, wild wolves were categorized as level 0 living beings, whose fighting force was equivalent to a common human soldier. A huge wolf was a level 1 living being that had physically evolved and mutated after the catastrophe and was much larger than the normal wolf. The huge wolf was much more fiercer, stronger, and more agile. A golden wolf was a level 2 living being which had further evolved and mutated from a huge wolf. A golden wolf looked brilliant as it shone with gold all over and was also larger than a huge wolf. It was said that a matured golden wolf could easily kill 3 LV-1 human fighters. Above the golden wolf were the level 3 bloody wolf and the rarely seen level 4 shadow wolf, which was said to be the top of all the beasts and magical beasts that had been seen in Wild Wolf Valley in the past few decades. Actually, people had rarely seen beasts above level 2 in the past decade, which was why Wild Wolf Valley was selected as the location for the survival training of the students of Black Hot City. Zhang Tai heard that no beasts above level 4 were found in Wild Wolf Valley because there were once many gold-eating boas here. Although those gold-eating boas had been exterminated, their high-level chi still lingered in this valley. The more advanced the beast or magical beast were, the more sensitive their chi would be and the farther the beasts would stay away from them. On the 6th day since the start of this survival training and also the day before it started to rain, the team headed by Berwick from 7th National Male Middle School besieged and killed 4 huge wolves. That was the first time for students to have hunted 4 level 1 magical beasts at once. Berwick greatly shocked Wild Wolf Castle this time. A large number of female communities and teams requested to cooperate with Berwick. Compared to Glaze, who was hapless these days, Berwick really obtained a good reputation this time. 1 week after the survival training started, the excellent figures from the different schools also gradually stood out. When Berwick's group gained the 4 huge wolves, a male student from the another school who excelled in archery, the one Barley had mentioned to Zhang Tai, became well known as Bowman Blues. In contrast to the achievements acquired by Berwick, which was obtained through a group effort, Bowman Blues from 2nd National Male Middle School climbed atop a tree alone and shot 2 huge wolves to death. Compared to Berwick, Blues was an individual with more heroism and easily aroused the adoration from the girls. As a result, Bowman Blues also became Mr. Perfect for every girl. Of course, there were more excellent figures among the 4 schools. The blacksmith workshop in Wild Wolf Castle gave off black smoke around the clock. The cutleries and the swords as well as some of the productive tools made in the workshop had already been placed on the square for sale. In the same workshop, it was said that someone had already started to build the model of the first steam machine. There were also 2 female students who were excellent characters. It was rumored that there was a girl who showed her superb skills of identifying and finding plants, as she had already easily found a 100 kilograms root of a kudzu vine buried in the soil. Another girl displayed her amazing ability of implementing administrative management, as she well organized all the items in the inner castle of Wild Wolf Castle. There was even one girl who was a LV-1 fighter, was even braver than most boys, and had already gone hunting with several friends, causing the other male students to be embarrassed. Those elites gradually showed off their talents, leading to this survival training becoming more and more boisterous. Compared to those glamorous figures, Zhang Tai's miserable life as a miner had seemingly just started. 2 days ago, he went to dig traps with the other members of Hit Plane Brotherhood. Yesterday, he took a break due to the rain. According to the regulations, if Zhang Tai wasn't able to submit more than 300 kilograms of iron ore today, then he would not be permitted to be a miner anymore. Therefore, the morning after the rain stopped, under the blessings and condolences of his brothers, Zhang Tai, once again, looked like a miner that was destined for the job. After checking his equipment, he silently carried that ugly mining basket and set off on his trip alone. That is too miserable. The other members of Brotherhood sighed at the sight of Zhang Tai's back. Chapter 80, Skyrocketing Basic Energy Storage. The rain finally stopped last night. As a result, the morning air in the valley was pretty good. Zhang Tai seemingly could even smell the fragrance of the roadside grass. However, the path in the valley became very muddy and slippery this morning as a result of the rain, thus one may easily slip if they didn't pay attention to the condition of the path. Zhang Tai had no choice but to slow down his walking speed towards the mine that was several kilometers away. Soon after Zhang Tai left the tree base, he had already encountered 2 groups of students hunting for food, with each group consisting of more than 10 people. When Zhang Tai passed them, those guys, at first, gave a look of amazement at his mining basket, but soon after, they cast a glare of contempt at Zhang Tai before raising their heads and striding away proudly. In the past couple of days, Zhang Tai had already become immune to those contemptuous glares. Unknown when he had read it, Zhang Tai remembered a certain sentence: a man who couldn't stand being alone would never grow up. In his current situation, for Zhang Tai, the current situation allowed him to grow alone. Growing along with Zhang Tai's heart was the castle of black iron. After the past couple days of hard work, Zhang Tai had already accumulated 2,000 basic energy storage by throwing baskets full of stones and iron ores into the pool of chaos within the castle of black iron. The amount of basic energy storage in the castle of black iron was several hundred times more than that before the start of the survival training. After having been converted into basic energy storage, the stones and mined ores quickly increased the strength of the castle of black iron. With the amount of basic energy storage presently available in the castle of black iron, it could already be used to make some slight changes to the topography of the castle of black iron, for example a small pool. However, Zhang Tai was currently not satisfied with just that amount. He wanted to accumulate more basic energy storage and then make a final decision once the survival training was over. In addition to the increasing basic energy storage, the ore value in the castle of black iron has also been rapidly increasing. Zhang Tai had found that all the seeds gifted by Grandma Teresa had already sprouted and were growing well. In addition to the seeds from Grandma Teresa, the potatoes, niblets, sweet potatoes, and the pumpkins in his own land were all growing nicely as well. Zhang Tai didn't know why, but in the past few days, he felt as if he was being followed on his way to the mines. However, this morning, the feeling of being followed was gone. This made Zhang Tai curious about whether he was going crazy again, but in the end, he didn't think too much about it. After the first rain in June, the valley had been covered with dandelions overnight. White hairy spheres of dandelions had already broken out from the ground one by one, seemingly waiting for the arrival of a gust of wind. At the sight of the cute dandelions, Zhang Tai felt pretty good. Without hesitation, he casually picked 10 of the white hairy spheres from the dandelions and tossed them into his mining basket. Half an hour later, Zhang Tai arrived at the nearest mining cave, which was only a bit more than 200 m away from Wild Wolf Castle. Many people had already been here to mine, and there was a small, rusty half-complete track, which was once used to transport carts, on the ground covered in weeds outside the mining cave, seemingly as if it was telling him that this place was once prosperous. This mining cave might have been very important in the past, but now it was just an abandoned place used by the unlucky students to do labor work in exchange for food. As it was too close to Wild Wolf Castle, it was easily noticed by the female students. Not many male students chose this mining cave as their base, as they were afraid of losing face under the gazes from the female students, thus this mining cave was not as lively as the other ones. Recently, there has been many new faces entering this mine to work, while many old faces would disappear. Zhang Tai guessed that there were more than 10 people, including himself, who constantly came to this mine to work every day. Most likely because this job was not something to feel honor from, and all the people who mined here were either introverted or didn't feel like talking. Zhang Tai had not even made a single bosom friend after working here for a while. However, this truly made Zhang Tai reassured. He could do whatever he wanted alone in the mining cave without having to worry about the others. There were many broken stones on the ground outside the mines, making it easier to walk since there was less mud. The entrance to the mines was large, measuring up to dozens of square meters. After arranging his equipment at the entrance of the cave and cleaning off the mud on his shoes using a rock, Zhang Tai took out a torch and a hoe before lighting up the torch as he held it while entering the mine. Although it was still daytime, after walking for a dozen meters in the cave and taking 2 turns, it was hard to see anything in front of him. If Zhang Tai didn't have a torch, he would not be able to venture deeper at all. Thankfully, the road ahead was flat without too many obstacles, thus Zhang Tai continued to venture deeper on the jet-black path. The illuminating torch and Zhang Tai's footsteps shocked several bats inside the cave, leading to the bats flapping their wings and making a loud noise. This would always frighten people entering the cave for the first time, and Zhang Tai was no exception. However, after having accessed the mine several times, Zhang Tai had become accustomed to it. The illuminating torch cast Zhang Tai's shadow onto the mining walls. As he walked forward, his shadow on the walls also accompanied him. Each time Zhang Tai entered, he could not help but peek at the jumping shadows on the walls of the mine that were brought about by the shaking of the illuminating rays from the torch. Besides his shadow, there were also many strange marks that were circular and similar to tire marks on the yellowish walls and the ground of the mine. Zhang Tai was sure those marks were not left by humans. Every time he saw those marks, Zhang Tai would think back to the legend of the gold-eating boas told by Sharwin that happened at this place 3 decades ago. Walking down the hole that stretched underground with walls covered in weird marks and had a diameter of 3 to 4 meters, whenever Zhang Tai thought about how the exaggeratedly terrifying boas that could engulf everything it met that used to climb in this tunnel, he would always feel terrified, feeling as if there were monsters in the pitch darkness staring at him. Although he knew it was just his imagination, Zhang Tai would always accelerate his footsteps whenever he passed by those strange tunnels. Faintly hearing the sounds of hose knocking at oars in front of him, Zhang Tai slightly calmed down. After walking several hundred meters in the cave, he finally arrived at the other end of this tunnel, revealing a spacious area in front of him. This area was even larger than the city square of Black Hot City and looked like a natural karst cave. Zhang Tai only saw a few dim lights in the entire underground space, which came from the torches of the people who had arrived before him. However, in this pitch darkness, the burning torches were just like dim oil lamps and could only brighten a small area. The sounds of knocking at oars constantly reverberated in this space. The sounds that reverberated inside this huge mine seemed to spread both far away and close. For people who had walked through the meandering tunnel, they would definitely let out a sigh of relief and would feel happy at the sight of the lights in the pitch darkness and upon hearing the reverberating knocking sounds. Well, at least that held true for Zhang Tai. As usual, Zhang Tai chose a place that was more isolated and subtle to do his mining work. The place he chose to work in was in another tunnel that was artificially made in the underground space. Even if he were to light his torch, he would not be easily noticed by others within that tunnel. In addition, there were several other intersections and turns inside this tunnel that seemingly led deeper underground. Therefore, that was a pretty ideal place for Zhang Tai to do whatever he wanted. Arriving at where he usually worked, he set up a small trick at the entrance of the tunnel using several broken stones. This small trick would alert him if anyone entered the tunnel. After placing the stones at the entrance, Zhang Tai was able to completely relax. Fixing the torch into a crack on the wall of the mine, dozens of square meters of space before him were illuminated. He placed his mining basket on the ground and poured out the spare torches and dandelions from within. He then removed the dagger, the kettle, and the dried ration from his waist. After drinking some water, he took up his hoe and began to work hard to gather the required amount of ores, joining the other sounds of knocking and forming a chorus in the underground karst cave. Unknowns to Zhang Tai, who was mining in the cave underground, a messenger falcon had brought the latest news from Black Hot City to Wild Wolf Castle. The news it brought was a big event that had happened in Black Hot City yesterday, and that big event was rightly related to the letter Zhang Tai had sent. After a week of brewing, the storm in Black Hot City shook the entire Andaman Alliance, while the storm from yesterday seemed to symbolize the arrival of a greater storm.